So, Calder, man, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I'm happy to be here. This is a real meeting of the worlds colliding.
It is. It
Good.
is, man. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're nobody is doing what you're doing. Not
I don't.
even.
It's not quite true, but not. I'm not even the only one doing what I'm doing on this stream right now. But uh,
Okay. Well, cuz I'm interested in that because I'm like, yeah, so yeah, I mean it would make sense that there's a lot that there are several people doing metal music.
yeah. Oh no, I just meant like you, like going deep, going off the beaten trail.
Oh, Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, my stuff, it's not so specifically music theory oriented, and, I mean, you have such a focus in what you're doing, and, I mean, it's all on metal. I mean, are there other people doing I mean, you've got the brand name Metal Music Theory locked, so, I mean, it's like everyone else
That
is
was
getting crushed.
that was a smart decision. Yeah.
It certainly was.
Uh, I mean, there's a couple dudes. There's like some dudes I didn't know about before, but they'd actually been doing stuff like this for a while. Daniel Crawford, shout out, Irish dude. He's was a guitar teacher, but he's done a lot of kind of stuff like this. And then Yogev is the big guy, the drummer. He does the kind of like slicker version, uh, for the like rhythmic stuff. Um, but
Slicker like, you mean slicker than what you're doing or slicker
oh
than
yeah,
Crawford?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, it's he have you seen those? It's like he has the like little cutouts on the table, and the editing's really smooth.
Okay.
It's
Yeah, no, I
nice.
haven't actually. I mean, I come upon instructional type things, guitar stuff because I teach guitar, and sometimes I'm lucky enough to get people who wanna play some interesting metal stuff. But, and so, yeah, I see some of this, like, these shred videos and stuff. But, I mean, your stuff, it's not a guitar instructional thing. I mean, you play it on
Yeah.
guitar because it's guitar music, but it's compositional and theory based. That's I don't know
Yeah.
who else is doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Yovegev's kind of doing that, but yeah, that was kind of the idea when I started out was like, and I think that was a lot of the friction I felt in the beginning was people were used to like guitar instructional videos, and then people who were watching it to try and learn how to play on guitar weren't really getting what they wanted.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, that's kind of been the niche that I've been trying to sit in.
yeah. I mean, it's because it's one of these things like people who don't really know about metal, but kind of like think it's interesting or respect it. There's this people know it's like, hey, those guys actually know a lot about music. There's that it's almost condescending
Yeah.
from normies, like just on some like, they actually are smart. But like your shit is like, no, it's Columbia, I'll have you know. And it's like it's like so extreme with how like yeah, just how legit the analyses are.
Yeah, yeah, I feel like I've finally caught up to the version of me from like when I was 13, 14, and I was like listening to this stuff, and I felt, like no one it's like, no, there's really something here that's like this is like cool shit. But it's yeah, so I'm finally like really sticking it to them. But I think the world's also kind of caught up too. It's metal's been around long enough. I feel like it's a lot less you get a lot less like weird looks for saying you're like really into metal, or maybe it's just the people I'm around these days. But um yeah, I feel like there has been a, as metal has aged, there's been this kind of the place it occupies in like popular culture has shifted a bit too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, big time. Early tens, I think, is when you used to see, you started to see, fashionable like thigh gap girls wearing fucking Burzum shirts and whatnot. Like yeah, I remember in high school, like I remember my girlfriend just cackling with laughter that I was listening to a band called Godflesh, and I was like, that's not even one of the goofy ones. Like, I was like, "That's kind of mature," I thought, like, I thought that but
Yeah.
it's like a social liability, it was just like people thought you were, like, kidding or, like, it's low IQ or something, like, it's like yeah, I don't know. But, were you but you started off, like, you were just from the start, like, musician, guitar player,
Uh,
metal, like, to
no,
from
I mean, I started playing guitar in 8th grade, so I was, uh, however old that is,
yeah,
14, 13. Um, so and I was like I came at it from, like, pop punk, and I just, like, really wanted to play Green Day covers and stuff because that's what my cousins were doing, and I thought it was so cool. They were a little older, uh,
nice.
and then, I got an electric guitar and decided to learn to sweep pick and, like, do all this other stuff, and I think it's, this is a story you hear all the time. You kinda get heavier and heavier, and you see how deep it goes, and then somewhere along the way, you kinda find or a bunch of stuff that you actually like.
Yeah, totally. You started with sweet picking? That's like you went straight to you went straight to difficulty?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's always, like, and that's probably says a lot about, like, why I'm doing what I'm doing and, like, where I am today, but it's like, I always liked the challenging stuff. I always liked like, um, I don't know, both on guitar and, like, theoretically, the puzzle, the challenge, the, like, athletic side of it.
Yeah, yeah. Did you know music like, did you have a music theory knowledge happening, like, right from the beginning of getting into metal, or was that kind of a little bit later that you started to, were you sweet picking, like, not knowing what it was, just reading tabs, that kind of
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was absolutely that type of player. Like, I didn't learn to read music until well into, I mean, like, college. I still, like, sight reading on guitar is hard for me.
Eh,
Um, and and for a lot of people, I think it's like guitar is kind of a weird instrument to sight read on, unless you're like a real heavy session player. But um, it's yeah, no, I was definitely like the type of guitarist that, like, just read tabs and had no idea what any of the notes were, and, like, um developed, like, yeah, I could play stuff that was really fast, but it's like the train tracks method, I just, like, if I messed up even a little bit, I had to, like, go back, start again, and, like, just you memorize this routine of, like, little
yeah.
movements.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, I have some students like that where they're like the train tracks thing, right? It's like they're not feeling bars and like any kind of segmentation, like it's just they're just like it's this many notes in a row. And yeah, it's hard for me to yeah, it's hard to start in the middle. It's hard to restart in the middle of things.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So but the other thing I did, which I'm also thankful for, is, like, I was always drumming. I was always, like, hitting stuff. Like, I never actually played drum, or I didn't start playing drums until way later, but I'm thankful for that because I think I, like, somehow somewhere along the way, I got a pretty good sense of rhythm. And it wasn't for a while until I, like, actually put those things together intellectually, figured out how everything fit together. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah,
my origin.
yeah, clearly you have great time as a musician and well, yeah, we'll get into this, like, in time, as it were, but but I noticed that I noticed that rhythm is a huge well, I don't wanna speak too broadly, but it seems like rhythm is a very central thing for you, even along with you do so much harmonic analysis and melodic stuff as well, but the rhythm does seem to be your like the primary, the thing that because
Yeah.
like and because your dissertation, I definitely want to get into it, but let's start more with the origin story. Let's do
Okay.
like the
Okay. Yeah.
the origin, yeah, yeah. So like yeah, so super technical shit. Yeah, what was your first like sweet picking wise? What was that?
Uh, I was listening to Origin, Antithesis, that album. So that was the one that I really, like, I, the sweeps and the song The Aftermath. It's like these like they're kind of like just silly, just like
Yeah, no,
like
Origin's
five.
crazy, yeah.
Yeah,
Origin, it's an origin story, that's what I
yeah,
asked for.
yeah. That's
So,
exactly right. That's what we're
it's gonna
saying.
be it's gonna be like this, Calder,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. So yeah, I just like decided I wanted to play those songs. Did a little like uh human abstract, but like I learned all that stuff kind of before I really learned like even like palm muting and like pinch harmonics and these other like metal guitar techniques that normally you would learn first.
Right.
So yeah, and I was doing all this on uh I was like trying to do this stuff on acoustic guitar for a little bit.
Mhm.
And
Nice.
then I finally got my first electric guitar, and I like spent a bunch of hours literally in the shed. My grandma had a like a wood shed with the lawnmower and the mulch and stuff, and I would just go out
Oh,
camp out there where I
that
wouldn't bother anyone.
rules. I
Um,
love that. I
yeah,
love that, an actual woodshed.
yeah, yeah.
Sick. Where are you from? Where I don't actually know your, like,
Yeah, so
background.
I my parents are foreign service. Well, they're retired now, but so growing up I moved around a lot. But I Virginia more or less for the time until I moved to New York, and I've been in New York for 6 years now.
Yeah, yeah. So you did right. Um, and because you said right, so you said you got into music theory in college, actually. So you were like that whole time just like doing crazy metal stuff just on the tab train tracks, and
Yeah.
then you learned theory like from an academic, like the straight up like studying music theory 101, just and then
Yeah.
you had to plug everything you knew how to play like into that, like in school.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's not entirely like I guess at the end of high school there was like a sort of a music theory class that I was lucky enough to have, and I wrote like an essay about Meshuggah and like so I guess it started a little earlier.
Yeah,
But the like yeah, I guess it's like so when I say like music theory, I like what I have in my head is this like academic institutional music theory where you learn counterpoint and then you learn uh romantic harmony and you learn classical form and you learn uh like then you if you're lucky you do like atonal posttonal theory.
yeah,
So like that stuff I didn't learn until uh undergrad, and even like a lot of that I actually only learned in grad school. um but I guess the rhythmic stuff, and what was so fun for me about the rhythmic stuff is that there isn't uh like a set path for that, at least the way that a lot of places teach it. It's so it
it's
felt
so
like
true.
I kind of like it was the Wild West. Like I could just like if I found something, it was a good chance that no one had really talked about it, so I could just like kind of I could name things as I went and like feel pretty cool. And like I
Yeah.
found out later there were actually people doing that stuff already that I just didn't know about. But
Yeah, no, it is interesting though that you bring that up because yeah, it's like at least in Western music, yeah, not in like Indian music or something, but like
yeah,
in Western music, right? Like rhythm doesn't get the same codified, rigorous, yeah, like obstacle course that you're expected. That's not the right metaphor, but
yeah, no, I like that. Yeah,
yeah,
it
you're
is
not
like
like, it's not the same level of, like, indoctrination, you know, you see what's rhythmically happening in Bach. It's
yeah,
largely harmonic rhythm, right? But you, like, kind
yeah,
of, you know, you're not that European music is like yeah, it's not that it's rhythmically, like, bereft or whatever, but it's, yeah, it's like notes. It's just so noted out, you
yeah,
know, which is why
yeah,
I love classical music and early music, you know, I am,
yeah,
like, such a notes cat,
yeah,
but yeah, you could just go so deep on rhythm, just like off road, you know. Um,
yeah, yeah. And I always kind of felt this tension between like throughout undergrad, even like in grad school, there's like because rhythm is like it's a pretty different like we use a lot of the same terms, but it's still a pretty different thing in the like classical music world, the like Western art music tradition, whatever you want to call it. It's because it's like rhythm is so much softer there. It's so much more like there's a lot more give and take. There's a lot more like it's it's precise, but it's precise in a different way. Like it's not precise to a grid. it's not precise to like a click. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all the like the transients are all a lot softer. You know, you have like a violin bow onset is a little, it's a gentler envelope uh
Yes. Yes.
than
No,
that.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, I've heard some people describe it as it's like music of the breath, uh,
Yeah,
rather than of the dance, you know?
yeah, yeah,
I
exactly.
there was something where I did this student composer workshop thing in the Czech Republic when I was like in my 20s, and I was also there as a performer, and this other student had written an electric guitar concerto. So I was like actually playing with this orchestra, and it was like and I was playing this stuff and I'm following the conductor, and the conductor's doing a downbeat, and then it's like um and
Yeah.
it's like, I have my time is killing objectively, and I'm there and I'm eating shit, man. I'm like, really, I mean, by the standards, I cannot follow it. I don't
Yeah.
understand this like breathing. I'm like, he went down. Where's the fucking,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
There's no like hard point, and everyone's like really watching and listening to each other, and it's like,
Yeah, and they're gelling, so I'm like,
yeah,
in this, my time is not good in this
yeah,
context, you know? It's like
yeah,
a yeah, we said
yeah,
transients, though, that's cool. It's such a good point. Yeah, it's
yeah,
literally the delivery system of
yeah,
the instruments
yeah,
is the envelope is like, yeah.
yeah. And you get, I mean, you get like vice versa too, like to what you were saying, where you hear these stories of especially like European classical ensembles coming in to do like an arrangement of a pop song or like something like that, where they have to like play to a click, or they have to like make these rhythms happen, and it's just like like,
Yeah.
what have you been listening, like where
Right,
have you
right.
ever heard a metronome, like, but it's just
Right,
it's a
right,
different.
right, it's a different, yeah, everything's always, like, rubato and stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, so you're like, yeah, like super rhythmically, you're getting super rhythmically deep. Then you're going to college. Well, so you went to Columbia for grad school, undergrad too,
yeah.
or
No, undergrad at UVA Virginia.
right on? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, in Charlottesville. Yeah, and I had a I had like a lot of cool stuff there. I had a really really cool guitar teacher, Mike Rosensky, shout out. He's still down there, but he big jazz guy, and he um kind of like, I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll try and learn jazz. And that was like, I never got very good at jazz, but it was really eye and ear opening, just
It
like
is.
going really deep on the jazz harmony stuff, the extensions, the substitutions, the um all that, and opening up the like uh language of improvisation a little bit more, and comping, like
Yeah,
I went real deep on the like just listening to how guitarists and pianists comp. It's like, man, it's like such a cool art form.
yeah,
um
yeah, yeah, yeah. Jazz is such a it's such a cool like. Yeah, I got it. I learned theory from jazz and then filled in classical gaps later. Yeah, it's so sick how jazz like those artists just like shortcutted, you know, like they just like quickly absorb the whole history of Western, you know, like
yeah,
harmony in this kind of shortcutty way, you know, like
yeah,
cutting out everything that wasn't necessary for
yeah,
the context or whatever. Yeah, but
yeah.
yeah. So like all right. So you also are studying physics, right? This is it. This is because
uh
this is
yeah,
interesting.
in undergrad at the time. So I did I went into undergrad thinking I would do a physics major, but I kind of fell in love with music theory, or I realized I was good at it. I already knew I like wanted to keep that up in some capacity. Um, and then by the end, I was like, I'm actually a lot better at music theory than I am at physics, which is maybe unfortunate, but um, I realized you could go to grad school. There were a lot of things that kind of um, the stars aligned, where I had great advisors, and they kind of pushed me to apply. And yeah, the physics, I don't know, like people used to always say like, oh yeah, that makes sense, music and physics.
It
And I don't
does.
know if, or music theory and physics specifically, and I don't know if that's like really true. Like, I guess there is something about the like rigorous thinking and the problem solving that like works in music theory. Um,
I
but
definitely
I
think so. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, pure math and music obviously have always, back to the Greeks or whatever, of course, yeah, physics. I mean, you said something in one of your videos that was really interesting. And I'm not gonna put you on the spot if you don't remember like what, but you said something about how you were like, you were analyzing, maybe it was Krallis or something, and you were saying like that you started to ask yourself, what is the point of studying music theory? And you had something where you were saying that that in physics you learn all the math, but you never learn what physics actually is. Do you remember saying this?
Yeah,
What?
yeah, yeah. This was from the latest video, so I do remember it. But it's yeah, I had this it was from a textbook from when I was taking modern physics, so quantum mechanics stuff, and the textbook starts by saying like, if you work really hard, you can learn to do quantum physics, but you won't nobody really learns what quantum physics is because it's so counterintuitive, it's so like non-physical, it contradicts everything that you think about how like physics work at every level. And I was kind of like, I don't know, like I was kind of struggling with that script for that Krallis video, um, because I felt like there's like only so far that I could go with the like tools of harmonic analysis that I was bringing to it, and even trying to be creative and say like, okay, well, think outside of the box. This is like this thing, but it's actually, actually okay if it's only a little bit like this thing, and it's maybe that's the point, is that it's like tantalizingly close to tonal harmony, but it's actually this kind of amorphous floating thing. um
Oh, wait, sorry.
and
Wait, so
I
you mean that like things being, you mean the theory, you mean the feeling that the theory is not fully describing what the music is, but it's like
Yeah,
almost there, but the gap, you mean feeling the gap between the theory and the thing itself, kind of, is that?
yeah, the gap between like, I think a lot of people have this idea that music theory is labeling chords or labeling scales or whatever, which is like part of it, but that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of the equivalent of like doing arithmetic, right? There are kind of clear rules for that, but the bigger picture of like, you know, not only like what so okay, so what? So you labeled like these chords. How do we bridge the gap between those labels and what this riff is doing to my ears? Or like, why does this riff feel like, there are other riffs that use these chords or this chord progression, why is this one so like viscerally different? um
Yeah. Well, see, but one thing I like though is in a couple of your videos, I mean, a lot of what you analyze is super complicated, which is, makes sense and is super interesting. But sometimes you do some stuff that's a little simpler. Like you were analyzing like a primitive man riff,
yeah,
and you were coming to it with so much respect and love, and it's like I liked it wasn't just in that video. You do this with some more complicated stuff as well. But I see, you describe like, oh, this is like tension and release. You get into aesthetics.
yeah,
You're not just doing numbers. You do attempt to get into like, yeah, like what's emotional about here? What's the tension and release? What's the rising and falling? There's like suspension, uh, making you wait for things.
yeah, yeah. That's one of the things that I like, I get from Joseph Dubiel, who's one of my advisors, was one of my advisors at Columbia. um and he's like this really kind of cool kooky cat. He's been around forever. He uh hasn't published a whole lot, but it's like taking classes with him, you like really get this sense of like this way of thinking. But one of his big uh like hills that he tried to die on, but then actually everyone agreed with him in the like kind of turn of the century, like around 2000, in music theory, was this idea that these like descriptive sentences can do as much theoretical work as labeling, and it's kind of empty to just like he's his like antagonist at the time was Alan Fort, who's the pitch class pitch class set guy who
That's
would
right.
go through and just like have these articles that are just lists of numbers, like this pitch class shows up here and here and here and here, and it's in inversion and here and here and here, and it's all these like analyses of Schoenberg and everyone. And he's like, no, like music theory, we shouldn't shortchange ourselves. We can actually do this music theory that, if you do that and then you also talk about what it feels like, it's like even more powerful. So like this idea that music theory should actually tell you something that you don't realize about a piece of music, and that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this stuff is about beauty. This is about beauty and the sublime. And yeah, I mean, a set of numbers. I guess people who are actual like mathematicians or maybe physics people do find a beauty, like an elegance in an equation being solved or whatever. But yeah, with music, you're not. Ultimately, there is this ineffable thing. But it's fun. Yeah, I like the quantifying and labeling stuff, but then trying to bridge it with the descriptive. With the descriptive sentence. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, and it's like, some videos, it's actually much easier for me to do the scripts for the really complicated songs, because you just do the analysis and then you can just kind of say what you find, and
yeah,
that's good enough. But some of these other videos where if you were just going to label the chords, that wouldn't seem like you've done very much. Or you're just going to say like, all right, well, this happens on the and of 2, and then
yeah,
happens again on the and of 3, the next measure, and that's the riff. um it's like I find myself like trying to, I feel like I owe it to myself, or maybe this is also just like the academic thing where it's like, you're constantly trying to get conference papers approved and get journal articles approved, and you have to like
sure.
push further. But it's like I feel like I have to do something else. So it's like, you do a little bit of the labeling type stuff, you do a little bit of the aesthetics, you do a little bit of the hermeneutics, like tying it all together, you do some like descriptive stuff. Yeah, so I think like that's always been my goal, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that you see that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, because there are a lot of people. I guess maybe your channel is very like by for and about musicians and stuff. But I mean, there are people, metal. Okay, I guess when you get into really technical out there shit, like it gets more and more like largely musicians' music. But if you take something like '80s, like Megadeth or something, plenty of people just love Megadeth, classic
Yeah,
metal, and
yeah,
they don't know anything. They're either not musicians or they are, but they don't know anything about music theory.
yeah,
And they know that Megadeth is deeper emotionally and on every level than like, Flotsam and Jetsam or something.
yeah,
They know, like, and it's they can't, so if you explain that to them why the riff for Holy War is like what's going on, that would
yeah,
click. They'd be like, "Oh, okay, right." Like, I don't care about the numbers, but they would, yeah, like
yeah,
see like what's powerful about the actual like variations and the stuff and the intervals and whatnot.
yeah. But then, like, at the same time, it's like, I you it's different from math in the sense that like I can't prove anything, right? I can't like have an airtight proof. It's like this song does this and this and this and this, and therefore it's deep.
Right,
So it's like I feel like that's the disconnect that I'm kind of like always struggling with, is like we have this system of names on the one hand, and then we have all these, you know, multifaceted, kind of elusive phenomenologies of actually listening to this stuff, like what it feels like to listen, and your personal history with a riff, and all this stuff. And it's like how no matter how much labeling you do, you're never actually gonna like turn that lead into gold to
right,
into this other thing. But
right.
like I feel like I don't know, I try and fake it in all the videos, right? Of like, say there's all this and there's all this.
Yeah,
And I think like really like ultimately what I'm trying to do is actually, like, I think even for people, like I get that a lot where people are like, oh, I love this, but I don't understand any of it. And it's kind of not the point. Like I don't really expect that many people to actually understand what I'm like, all the
right.
details I'm going to it, because a lot of it's stuff that like would be go over the heads of most people if I presented it at a music theory conference. And that's not like saying like, oh, I'm so smart. It's just saying like I don't really go to that great lengths to explain things very clearly.
Well,
Um,
it's trade stuff, you know? I mean,
yeah,
academia is like, yeah, it's like this, it's like a sealed
yeah,
sealed
yeah.
zone, you know? I
But
think
it's
though wait, sorry, go ahead.
just to finish the thought, like I think the appeal of watching these videos is like you have a riff that you already know that you like, and then you look at it, you hear it from a bunch, hear it slower, you hear one guitar part at a time, you hear what if it was this different way, and like all of that, I hope is like still entertaining, even if you don't care at all about like metric theory or what this is saying about non-isochronous meters or any of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I'll go on tangents with this with my guitar students, like literally just doing like a Radiohead song being like, "Look, it's a borrowed minor." Like, "Look,
Yeah,
it's minor instead of major. Isn't that beautiful?" They're like, "Yeah, in fact it is." Like you could
yeah,
tell. But
yeah,
like, yeah, I mean, I think something I really don't like about I don't know, there's some anti-intellectualism in a lot of music that I sort of I understand where it's coming from, where people have a sort of an anti-elitism and a sort of protectiveness of the mystery and beauty of art, that they don't want things to be demystified, punk, and whatever, and noise music and stuff. But yeah, I think to me it's just a real testament to the just a belief in the just unassailable depth of certain music to be like, yes, I can analyze this. I could tear at the fabric all I want. It always will be mysterious. There will always be that gap of like why it's deep. Like you can't demystify it, no matter how much you demystify about it. You know what I mean? Like music can
yeah,
withstand this. It can
yeah,
withstand this analysis. It's never going to be like robbed of the magic.
yeah,
So like that's why, yeah,
absolutely. Like I think the like that idea, and like kind of another angle on that is like people will say things like, "Oh, you spent so much time with this music. Don't you didn't that ruin it for you? Doesn't it like you said, like take away the mystery, or you just get too familiar with it?" And it's like that hasn't been my experience ever. Like, the more I know about things, actually the more I like them typically, and the more details you find within something that you like. And even like things that I don't like, I've had this experience, for uh like when I've had to for my analysis exams, or like these other guitar students bring in something or whatever, and I have the song that I don't really never really listen to, or I don't love, and I'm like forced to look at details, and like inevitably you like it more the more you like notice, oh, there's like this little connection. It's just like paying attention. But yeah, absolutely, like it's never you're never going to reveal the mystery, you're never going to like solve the thing.
yeah, yeah. No,
And
it's infinite.
this came up a couple times with my like the interviews I did for my dissertation. But like I talked to Greg from Car Bomb, and he has this like idea that their music is kind of like a magic trick, and it's like he was kind of hesitant. He was like, I don't want you to talk about this stuff on YouTube because I don't want you to like give away the trick. But I'm I don't know. I know more about their music than a lot of people, and I like it even more for that. Like even
Yeah.
knowing what's going on, it's like it's not you know if there is a way that you could spend so much time with something that it stops being magical, like I haven't gotten there yet. So
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's funny because Car Bomb, it's funny to think of them as they are hyper technical, but I actually don't think of complexity. I think of them as just like hard New York shit from
yeah,
Queens. Like I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
like
exactly.
the spirit of it to me is just that it sounds
Yeah,
like a Car Bomb.
yeah,
It doesn't. Yeah. Um, yeah, you did. Oh man. Okay, so maybe this is where we start talking about your actual dissertation. Well, I mean, on the topic of Car Bomb, though, I know your fans in the comments like know this, but my fans don't necessarily know all the details here. And we got to cross pollinate here. You did a visual analysis of headbanging at a car bomb show. Is that right?
Yeah. So I had this video footage from their San Diego show. Someone else um took it, but it's this cool video. It's supposed to be a drum cam video, but the byproduct is that you can actually see the crowd because it's like up above Elliot's head. So I developed this kind of tedious and annoying to implement method for tracking the way that people are headbanging, and turned it into graphs, and did commented on that. So I this is like the very first stage. I had much bigger plans for this thing, but the um time was uh ever less. There was always less time than I I would
Yeah.
have liked. But it's yeah, so the kind of premise of this is that a lot of people say like, oh, that music is so complicated, people must not know how to headbang. Like it's you have to you have to study it before you can headbang, which is just like simply not true. Like demonstrably, you go to a show and everyone's headbanging.
Yeah.
um but so kind of looking at the details of that, looking at where people get lost, where people are doing different things from each other. So it's very very small sample for that, but I'm that's going to be a big thing in the coming years for me to like scale that to bigger shows and more shows, more bands.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm watching like a somewhat technical or like a band with some kind of odd rhythms or something, and I'm watching someone headbanging, and I'm like, I wonder if they know it or not. And I'm like, are they going to correct? Are they going to turn? Are they going to turn it around when the beat?
Yeah,
When
yeah,
there's a 9/8 bar, are they going to turn the beat around? And they, it's like sometimes people like they do it. It's like,
yeah,
okay. Then
yeah,
other times, they're like it's more disorienting. I mean in the little clip? Um, in the small clip of that I saw from the car bomb show, the video you had, I mean, people were headbanging totally differently, which is, I mean, of
yeah,
course, that's like the point, right? That different people were feeling the beat in totally different ways, right?
yeah. There was, so there were like 5 people in the video, and like 2 of them were kind of locked in with the cymbals the whole time, like in a way that made you think that they actually knew the song pretty well. They expected when it was changing. It's the beginning riff from Lights Out, so it feels like it speeds up like 4 times in within like 15 seconds. Um, and then one person's not moving, one person is moving, but it seems kind of unrelated, and I forget, 4 or 5 people, but it's like, yeah. So I kind of like go into detail with all those. The big cool thing that I found with that was like when you actually look at the data, you can see that there's often like right around the point where things change in the music is people will like become a little more tentative, and then they lock into the new one, and it's even bigger. So it's like this idea that these changes are actually serving the music. They're making it more kinetic, more like explosive feeling.
Yeah. I mean, even in the most classic or just the most like I don't know, like ignorant hardcore or whatever,
Yeah.
like super simple. It's I mean, the tempo change is where,
Yeah.
in fact, legitimate violence might erupt in a
Yeah.
pit. It's
Yeah.
actually like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I like that, like, Carbomb kind of, you know, figure that out, and they're like, well, okay, well, let's just do it more. Let's do it every couple seconds and see what happens.
Yeah, that's really cool to see. So yeah, I mean that's a very clear example of where you're looking at like um levels of physical intensity, physical excitation from these technical things that are happening, it's like because this music, the fact that this is all rock music is weird. I mean, it's coming,
Yeah.
from it's coming from fucking Little Richard more than it's coming from Hildegard or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like it's like you are dealing with music of the dance, uh
Yeah.
despite whatever, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. There's a like one of the recent dissertations that came out the year before mine, but it's like looking at metal, like the legacy of groove music in metal, and like it's actually there's a lot of interesting reasons for this, but it's actually there's a lot more in common between a lot of metal and like James Brown than there is with like a lot of metal musicians will claim like Vivaldi or uh, these Baroque composers as influences when like really culturally at least like what's happening at the shows is everyone is kind of dance music.
yeah.
um and like that, I think that's a really important starting point to have in mind.
Yeah, and I mean, crazy syncopations and, like, 16th note, you know, it's like, yeah, that's not yeah, Baroque music is
Yeah,
yeah, I know, the metal thing of, yeah, citing Vivaldi or, it's almost like this seems like this sort of nod to the idea of virtuosity or the idea of high culture, quote unquote, or like
yeah,
lost like nostalgia for Europe or something. When really it's like, no, you're American as hell, dude.
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like even when it gets really, it seems to get really far away from just like 4/4 repetitive grooves. It's still Car Bomb, like all of them in interviews have said over and over like the groove is the primary thing for us, and that's where we're that's always our kind of our compass in like riff writing, is if we want to like get right to the edge of where it stops grooving but then pull it back just a little, so it's a
yeah,
weird groove but it's still based in that same bodily experience. And I think that's something that people get wrong, or people miss a lot, is like this idea that this music seems so intellectual because I transcribed a bunch of it and it looks absolutely insane on the page. It's like time signatures changing every measure and it's all these weird tuplets and all this stuff. But it's like that, I think that you know kind of obscures the real truth of it, which is that this is like music that makes you want to like throw someone. Like
yeah.
it's both intellectual and physical, and those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. I mean, I said this when we were talking about some Extra Life stuff and Anthony Braxton stuff. It's like there's stuff with that when I was getting into that, playing that music and learning that music, though, where it would be like the music doesn't in any way outline any kind of groove, but it would be learned against a pulse,
Yeah,
and so it would just be these things that if you just listen to them, it's just like ba-dum, bump, bump, ba-da, bump,
yeah,
bump, but you're feeling it like da-dum, bump, ba-da, bump, 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 it's like,
yeah,
so we'd all be like really grooving like together, like head banging actually in rehearsals, but then the tuplets that you're feeling against it don't actually
yeah, yeah.
um
Yeah,
but
which that's what was sick when I was doing that video about I Don't See It That Way, is like going back and looking at the live videos of you guys, and it's like, oh, there it is. Ba-dum, boom, ba-dum, ba-dum, boo-dum, boo, da-da-da, boom.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
It's
you
like,
see the car bomb the car
yeah,
bomb video, but we're actually all in sync. I mean, and it's like, I don't know in different genres. Well, just the only one I'm actually talking about is in classical music. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I said I did that one thing with the orchestra thing, but I don't really know what it's like in a rehearsal of like state of the art virtuosic new music coming out of classical
yeah,
ensembles. Like I know that those cats nail
yeah,
insanely hard rhythms together, but I don't know if they're I wonder if there's a different physical way that people who come out of classical music and get to those crazy rhythms, if they are arriving at the tightness maybe with less of with less of that groove. But I don't want to
yeah,
stereotype and say that they don't, because they're killing it, so maybe they are. I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah. No, I think like I mean, I've heard from people who play that music, at least in that world, that you do kind of fake it at a certain point, like because
Right.
some of these things, it's like no one's going to hear the difference. And you like, or a lot of times, you're practicing something and you think it's the right way, but then you like go back and it's like, actually that's not quite it, but it's, we've hardwired it now. Um
Yeah.
but yeah, like I there's this quote that I kind of made a lot of in one of my things about big music theorist from the like 60s. I'm forgetting who it was, but he was describing what it was like to learn this Milton Babbitt piece, and he was like, when I was learning it, we all got to the point where we were hearing it as these syncopations against this grid, and we were all like completely locked in. And it was like a couple months later I listened to the recording and I couldn't hear that grid anymore, even though he had recorded it and like learned that.
Yeah.
um so I think there's a little bit of both, and I think it's, there's always, with that really weird stuff, there's always going to be some degree of like rote memorization where you just like, how it goes, and like the grid is maybe a scaffolding to get you there, but eventually, like if you're going to be playing it live, you're going to be touring it, you're going to be recording it, you've got to have it like as a group, just as this thing that you can whip out and perform, and that
Yeah.
might not have anything to do with or have as much to do with the grid anymore.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. I remember in the Z's rehearsal, we were like checking with Ian, the drummer, and we were like, it was one of these really pointillistic pieces, and we were like, Ian, it's like, what do you have in bar 84? And he just goes, because it was like, it was like some isolated part of like a septuplet in the middle of
Yeah.
something. So it's like as though that's information to
Yeah.
us. But it's just like we're just like we are fucking nerds here. We're just like we've like left the fucking Falcon, cannot hear the Falconer.
Yeah.
But well, let's talk specifically about your dissertation. You might be.
Yeah.
I know. Are you sick of it? I want to know though.
I've recovered. I know. I'm happy to talk about it. It's actually it's been probably a month since I've talked about it. There was definitely a period, like the last couple months of writing it, when I was just like proofreading, and like I didn't even know what the words said anymore, and I didn't want to
we
talk about
can
it.
we can use it as jumping off points
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
tangents, but in the words of Narduar, we have to know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean it's like the title of it. It's a Tactus Transformations in
Yeah.
metal. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, which I actually I messed up the title at the last second when I put it into the like whatever. It was supposed to be perspectives on Tactus Transformations in metal, to like get at the different the the different kind of academic methodological perspectives, but it's fine. It gets
When you
the job
entered,
done.
you mean when you typed in the thing of like this is what my
Yeah,
you
when I
left
went
out
to like
perspectives.
on the like official form, like I had been telling everyone that the working title was perspectives on, but oh well.
That kind of does it rule? I don't know.
I don't
Maybe
know. It's a
yeah.
simpler title. I'm always like, I'm always trying to fight against the tendency for academic titles to be like, two clauses and like 40
Yeah.
words. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, at least you
keep
didn't
it
have
simple.
at least you didn't have toward, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's,
Otherwise, geez.
yeah, yeah. It's like although
Yeah,
that's kind of metal too though, right? Toward
yeah,
the blah, blah,
yeah.
blah, yeah.
Slouching towards
Yeah.
Gomorrah or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did you okay, before we get into your thing, the classic, the Doug Moore article, the death metal English.
Yeah.
Did you read that back in the day? It's classic, right?
Oh
It's
no,
like,
no, I didn't. I mean, I talked to Doug for the dissertation.
oh
And
yeah.
I've been meaning to look back at the other stuff he's written, but
Yeah, yeah. He wrote this thing. It wasn't some serious academic. It
yeah,
was just it was like a really funny, very educated but goofy thing
yeah,
for Invisible Oranges. It was like 10 years ago. It
yeah,
was just about death metal English, and he was just like, yeah, he was just like, there's a gerund, and then there's like, something to something in something. It's like that's what
yeah,
But yeah. But okay, so talk this dude. Okay, so this is funny, man. Or no, I don't know if it's funny. It was strange. It was strange to me. I did not know the term Tactus. I
yeah,
didn't know that. I just thought it was like pulse. Is that what it means?
yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of, that was kind of intentional. It's this obscure word. It actually comes from medieval or like late medieval, early Renaissance music theory. Um, but it was kind of co-opted more like in 2007 by Justin London, who teaches at Carleton. He's done a ton of like really good work on meter and rhythm, but he used it because pulse and beat and I mean those are the two big ones, are kind of ambiguous in either because in everyday usage they mean something else, or because they, even within theory, like pulse, sometimes people mean that's the like most basic beat, but sometimes pulse means the underlying like the subdivision layer. So
Okay.
he uses Tactus as the like just to disambiguate those terms. That okay, this is the Tactus is the level that you're going to headbang to. That's the level that you're going to tap your foot to. That's the like basic organizing level, and then
Okay.
there's levels above and below that.
Yeah. It's just literally what is being counted. If you're in 4/4, the quarter
Yeah,
notes are the
yeah,
top. Okay.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right on. But so transformations, that so is that how is that different than Tactus transformations? Like how is that different than just like meter changes like bar
Uh,
to bar?
Yeah, so some meter changes will be Tactus transformations, but like if you're going from 5/4 to 4/4, you're not actually going to change the Tactus. You're not actually, you can headbang through that, and maybe stuff
Oh,
will happen that will, maybe you're going to mark it some other way that there's a downbeat, but
right.
your basic headbang is not going to change. So I was looking specifically at these moments which are more disruptive, I find, when you do actually have to change how you're moving to something. Either these moments where you go from, you have a bunch of measures of 4/4, and then suddenly you have a measure of 7/8, so you get like 1, 2, 3, but oh wait, I have to kind of stumble and find the beat again,
Yeah.
or tempo changes and these other more disruptive things where like you leave behind the grid altogether. Like in these like sumac does this a lot, where they go between these like free improvised sections and these more like kind of mathy like math sludge sections.
Yeah, they're so sick, man.
Yeah, yeah,
They did kinda take me a second, but
yeah,
goddamn, there's
yeah,
some of the most interesting stuff out there.
yeah,
But like but like, but there's like I assume you talk about just the difference between, how the band or the composer, composer and metal, the band is
yeah,
feeling the Tactus versus how people are headbanging, right? I mean, so I assume you talk about the car bomb phenomenon, right? With people,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. So that's part of it. Like that stuff actually ended up kind of being uh amputated from the dissertation, and that's its own article now. This idea, I have this, it's I call it parallax, this idea that you look at the same thing and it's different depending on how you look at it or how you listen to it.
Yeah.
um and that's going to be an article, an academic article, in Music Theory Spectrum next year probably. um so yeah, but that's another big part of it, is like, you can't, it's hard often to even decide what the Tactus is. And there are simple examples of this where you have like, some people are headbanging to this, and then some people are headbanging twice as fast, and it's
Sure.
like not
Yeah.
stuff that's even not very complicated otherwise, but there's always that ambiguity.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I suppose people would be headbanging to some kind of polyrhythm that's happening over it. If it's bum,
yeah,
bum, 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 people could easily be
yeah,
headbanging to like bum, 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 or whatever,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's so crazy to think about, man. Just like, I mean, metal has gotta be like, what other kinds of music are doing that kind of large scale, like, changes? Like, I mean, modern classical music, of course, is always like, that's the there's
yeah,
always the most complex stuff, but it's like, it's not dealing with any kind of headbanging, really. I
yeah,
mean, minimalism, I suppose, but
yeah, yeah. That's kind of exactly the well, I stumbled on this justification later in the process, but this idea that I don't think there's any other music that is that complicated and that physical at the same time. So
yeah,
you have, obviously there's lots of music that's that physical in hardcore and like most of metal in uh EDM, even pop punk, all these dance music styles. And then there's music that is as complicated. So like modern jazz, like a lot of the stuff that people are doing in uh, Matt Mitchell, Miles Okazaki, Dan Weiss, Kate Gentile,
Yeah.
all these New York
Yeah,
cats.
Steve
Uh,
Lehman is, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Tyshawn, sorry.
yeah. And all these classical composers, kind of starting with Milton Babbitt, Elliott Carter. There's this whole the new complexity tradition where they're doing this like super out there, dense, weird stuff. But you go see those shows and people aren't really moving, people aren't
No,
dancing.
no.
So metal is this like cool intersection between those two things, and that's what makes it like possible to do this, music theory analysis and also headbanging analysis and put them in common or conversation with each other.
Yeah, man. I mean, one of the things that just makes metal, it also just culturally, well, musico-culturally or whatever, it's like you've got a situation where some of the most complicated riffs that you analyze, some of these artists know everything or almost everything that you know about music theory.
Yeah.
Some of them know very, very little as
Yeah.
far as what they would call these things, and there's just such a spread of how much, quote unquote literacy, there is about this stuff, which I always just the sick thing about metal. So many sick things, but there is always this like I'm trying to think how to say. It's like I want to say blue collar or something, but it's like this sense of like not being afraid of virtuosity because it's like or complexity because like it's not being viewed as like it's not being viewed as snooty or elitist.
Yeah.
It's like being viewed as like, dude, we're gonna do the most fucked up, like crazy shit. Like it's not considered pretentious
Yeah.
it's considered like fun and organic and like shit you do with your boys to make these like create
Yeah.
these insane structures,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's it's like I mean there's a couple sides. I think one side of that is that going back like what you said a minute ago about some people know this stuff really in depth, some people don't. I think there is one layer of that where there's this like kind of culture of uh maybe omerta is like too strong a concept, but like we don't talk about musical details. Like everyone, no matter what you're actually doing in the studio, you have to play dumb in interviews. You have to say, oh yeah, we just go out there, have a good time. We're just jamming, we're having a good time. Even when a lot of these bands are actually like kind of closet nerds sitting down and like diagramming stuff out or like meticulously mapping stuff out in Guitar Pro or in MIDI or whatever to like learn how to play this stuff.
Dude,
Um
I was not aware of that because it sounds like, you've done, interviews, like serious
yeah.
interviews with cats. Like I didn't know that people are quote unquote playing dumb or trying to keep it raw when they actually do know more than they do. And the idea that it's an honor thing. I know you were kidding with Omerta, but like the idea that right, the idea that like describing the mode that you used in like the fucking breakdown is like that's like ratting, it's like
Yeah,
ratting on your
yeah.
friends.
Or it's like like it makes it harder to suspend disbelief or so. Like I don't know. I think there's a lot of flavors of this, and there are people who really do these things quote unquote intuitively. Intuition is just means that they've kind of incrementally built this up, and I think in a lot of cases, like what I'm trying to do in the second chapter of the dissertation, and what I want to keep doing, I think this is kind of like the most promising, fruitful like avenue for my research going forward is these people, like you can't actually make any music without knowing anything. It's just a question of what you know in words, what you can put into statements and write down or say to someone.
Yeah.
uh but you can't play drums without knowing what meter is, even if you don't know the word meter or you don't count or whatever. Like even like
Yeah.
Lars Ulrich, early Metallica, who didn't know how to play to a click and didn't know how to count to four or whatever. like clearly he knew something, like his
Yeah.
body knew something, his brain knew something. So it's like trying to bridge the gap of like what does music theory look like if we don't tie it to these like officially institutionally sanctioned ideas. And that's kind of what I was trying to do with the second chapter, is like look at like what do these people actually do in the studio, in when they're writing down cheat sheets for the drummer, when they're like learning new songs and they like have to tell each other like, oh, this part goes like this, oh, that's the part where we do this thing, like they're like kind of trying to excavate all of that stuff and say this is actually music theory too. It's just not the music theory that you learn in school. It's this very
Yeah.
specialized kind of informal music theory, but you can't, yeah, like even if you think you don't know anything. And I think a lot of people have this experience where they go to a music class sometime in high school or maybe college, and they feel like they're made to feel like they don't know anything about music. And then
Yeah.
they internalize that and they're like, well, I'm just going to go make my music, but I'm dumb. I don't know anything. Um, which I think is a shame in some ways, but also it leads to a lot of cool music. I think not all music is actually better off for being in the classroom or
Yeah.
whatever.
No, totally.
Um,
And people get into it. People are the same way with like philosophy and stuff. People be like, so like, do I have to read so and so to read? I'm like, no, you don't have to just read the thing. You don't
yeah,
have to have done anything. It'll all
yeah.
come together. Or won't all come together. But yeah, yeah. I mean, like, yeah. In rehearsals, there was always in several different bands. I've had the thing of like, what is a time?
Yeah.
And you're just like, let's do it 5 times. And you're like, is a time the whole like which thing? It's like you're getting into, yeah, like just
Yeah.
describing what's the unit that we're thinking
Yeah.
the thing is. Um
And, like, that
but
gets into, like, some really deep stuff. Like, normally, I find those things run up against these things that music theory actually isn't really equipped to deal with, like, saying, like, where a section starts and ends, like, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not, and it's, like, in a lot of metal songs, it's less clear than in other stuff, and, like, the way that I think like the flip side is that music theory as like an institutional academic practice, whatever, has a lot to learn from how metal musicians actually like do this stuff in practice, because they're like metal musicians do a lot of things that music theorists say, oh, that's music cognition people, whatever, say like, oh, we tested this in the lab and people can't do this, but there are people doing it. There are people like playing stuff where the subdivision is faster than 100 milliseconds, which that's like one of the big replicated things in labs.
huh.
And this stuff with like, oh, you shouldn't be able to track more than 1 meter at the same time. We haven't proved that you can do that. It's like, well, people are doing it. Like, it's up
Yeah,
to you to figure out how they're doing that.
yeah, it's
Um,
just like autism and like brutal slams, that's like fucking what it is. Dude, but like wait, let's go back to the one. I love weird details like this.
yeah.
The people, it's like it was like neuroscientists said that you can't, or that you're not supposed to be able, the human brain is not supposed to be able to subdivide things down to what's the
Uh,
time
uh,
interval?
it's supposed to be like when things get to around 100 milliseconds, so a tenth of a second. So, uh, quintuplets at 120 beats, 16th note quintuplets at 120 beats per minute,
Okay,
or
let's do it.
whatever.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Wait, 120 beats per minute. No,
Yeah. All right.
we
All right.
are
Yeah.
about to do this. We can't do it together, the time lag.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, what if we did? All right.
Yeah.
So 120. Um,
And then
yeah.
subdivide each of those into five.
All right. Let me get this. Okay. Metronome 120. All right. And oh damn, it's like it's linked to my it's linked to this
Uh,
Bluetooth thing over here. Here, let me turn the Bluetooth off. Okay, so I'm gonna put it in 1/4, so we're not okay. So 120, and we're supposed to do quintuplets against that, right? So
yeah.
I can't just physically do it with my mouth,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. But yeah, the idea is like you're not supposed to be able to track like if the meter, if you're in like 7/8 and it's that fast, like or whatever, you're not supposed to be able to, or not, you're not supposed to, but the majority of people start to fail at that point. And the thing that I find in metal is that a lot of metal musicians actually take this a lot further. And this is a lot further than even like trained classical musicians. So there are all these things that are, and this is coming from Justin London. Hearing in Time is the book. It's a lot of really cool stuff. It goes pretty deep. This is one area. There are a lot of areas I actually disagree with him because of metal people specifically, but it's a cool starting point. Um, but there's a lot of this stuff where metal musicians are doing things that there is no that would seem to contradict what music cognition research, like empirical objective research, says.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, yeah, not knowing that you're not supposed to be able to do something, and then just
yeah,
people are just
yeah,
doing it. I mean, this is the non-institutional, it
yeah,
just, yeah, it's like this certain type of personality, this like fearless and like this like that's like you were talking about early on in the thing that like the pipeline of just wanting to get more and more extreme. Of course,
yeah,
extreme can mean different things to different, like is it brutality and heaviness, or is it, or is it the complexity, but yeah, if you don't know that there's supposed to be a limit, I mean, you just break the boundaries.
yeah,
It's yeah. You
yeah. And
were, yeah, sorry, no, go
uh,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like the thing that breaks the boundaries is like doing specific training in that area, and then like magic, you do that for a few years. You're a drummer and you work on your single hand speed to the point where you can do stuff like that. Suddenly your brain can hear as fast as your hand, and your hand can go faster than, like, you can do a single not a single stroke roll, but like a single hand blast beat, whatever, at a certain speed, and like you've broken the boundary. But it's just, classical musicians never actually train for that because their music doesn't require it.
Yeah,
Whereas metal musicians have actually been training for this stuff for, like you said, stuff is getting faster and like harder to play. And yeah, if you
yeah.
practice something, you can do it, weirdly enough.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, in jazz, there's there as well. I mean, just since John Coltrane, I mean, it's like a young player, no matter what they're, no matter what they're trying to do artistically, there is an expectation that you can do certain things.
Yeah.
Is the standard has been set, it's just,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy that can be, yeah, that can just be like passed down, you were talking, you said in one of your talking about your dissertation, you were talking about issues of memorization, right, which we've kind of been talking about, and you also said like community. You were talking about like issues of difficulty and community, which I thought was makes sense, but I was just, I don't know, interested
Yeah.
in what's the
Yeah. So
what's the
that's
community aspect.
the fourth chapter kind of turns around and asks. So the first chapter is, um doing a music theory taxonomy of all these Tactus transformations. The second chapter is looking at how bands are making these things happen. So the thing I was talking about, looking at cheat sheets and MIDI and drum machines and all this other stuff. The third chapter is the headbanging stuff, and then the fourth chapter is kind of turns around. It's like, why do bands spend this much time on this stuff? Like, there's the quote from it shows up in the car bomb documentary from like 15 years ago or whatever. And it's one of the drummers from Death. Uh, but basically he says, like, why do we do this? And he's like, well, it's the music where you're going to have to practice the hardest and it's not going to get you laid. So like, what are any of us doing here?
Yeah,
Um,
that is the most pure. It is so fucking pure. And that kind of still is true with death metal and technical stuff. Black metal since 2011 will get you laid. But like, the sketchier the better, right?
yeah.
But like death metal is still
Yeah.
like, that's still like pizza and sweatpants shit
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
far as normal people are concerned. Um
Yeah. So the community aspect is one answer to that, is like, there's, you feel like uh people are, you feel like there are people who value what you're doing, in addition to, obviously you value it intrinsically for whatever reason. um but like uh like there's also this community, like, I know that, like, I'm gonna go to a show and I'm gonna see a bunch of other people who like are also into this stuff for whatever reason, whatever paths took us here. um and you play in a band, you've got your bros who like you're all reinforcing each other, like writing stuff, learning stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a beautiful.
that's
I mean, it's really like, I mean, people joke about it like it's goofy or cute, but I mean, it is, but it's deep. Like, when you see someone wearing a death metal shirt, I mean, it really is. I mean, if you know, like yell like infernal hails or whatever, but I mean, but there is like this like love, like like
yeah.
we somehow got to this place, especially like now I've moved even further out into Queens. The running into metal shirts situation in Queens is just always like, like
Really?
so rich, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. There's like this couple, these like two dudes who are like, they've got to be like 60 and they look like Hell's Angels, like biker dudes. They live near me, and it's like, and they live together, and they've always got black metal or death metal shirts. And they're like, and I don't think they're like a couple. I think they're actually like, I get the impression they're just like dudes, and it's like a new death metal shirt like every day. It's like, yeah,
That's
I love
sweet.
these days. But yeah, like I think I think a lot about well, I'm interested, you've discovered like with interviewing people and the secret, breaking the omerta, or like, seeing like you've been in behind the in the rooms, like talking about how the music's communicated, what people know and don't know. I mean, I'm like, I'm always interested in the like, see, not politics in the sense of ideology, but politics in the sense of like power relations, not necessarily in a bad way, but just like functioning relationships between people, with like notation versus verbally doing it, collaborative writing versus one person being a
Yeah.
composer, like it just, like just wondering how in different bands, how that's going down, and like, I mean, I always used to assume that like, notation, notation is such a very, it's a particular, it's like the coolest thing in the world, but it's this really particular power dynamic
Yeah.
of like cybernetically commanding someone to do
Yeah.
physical motions, like fine motor things that you wrote with text. It's like demented, right? I mean, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. And you can achieve things that you can't achieve like any other way.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can achieve things that way you cannot achieve any other way. But then the verbal working it out thing, that's even deeper and more gnarly, because there are power relations of someone insisting on an idea, but they're mushed together in some conversation in a jam session that you haven't even seen.
Yeah.
It's like so nuanced, that's like
Yeah.
kind of more fascinating,
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool. And it's like, um, I mean, like at least like the car bombs is like, I kind of got inside of that process a little bit, which is like Greg, the guitarist, will like jam on his own with a recorder, and he'll, pick his favorite riffs. Then he sends them to Elliot, and he was like, Elliot always does some weird thing with this that I was not expecting. And then they'll like, between the two of them, they'll plot it out in they use Reaper, I think. But whatever, like, they plot the MIDI, and then they record it together, and then John comes in, the bassist, and like adds his part, and that's another layer of like, oh, I wasn't really expecting that, but that's cool. And then finally Mike comes in at the end, and like, vocalists are always the last to know. Maybe
Right,
not
right.
with you with Extra Life, but
Well, that's a different kind of, that's,
yeah,
I mean, in metal, honestly, in a, like extreme metal, I mean, I think vocals, well, to me, I think metal, like harsh vocals, are essentially a percussion instrument. I mean, if you're just like, if you're not doing pitch and you're just doing
yeah,
like
yeah,
guttural or high, But of course, it's not. I mean, because there is the presence of this subjectivity, even if you can't make out the lyrics. So
Yeah,
you can never reduce the voice to something as simple as that. But it's so much
yeah,
more like a percussion instrument. But yeah, I mean, think about like fucking the idea. Think about from a classical music perspective, the idea of being like, oh yeah, the bass player is now going to write their
yeah,
part.
yeah,
Like, that changes so much, that's
yeah,
like it changes the entire that's like changing, like, the sky or the
yeah,
ground more like,
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
like, what is the terrain?
yeah.
It's, yeah, yeah, it's wild. I love that, man. It's just such a yeah. Who gets into some have you ever analyzed, any immolation?
No, but I love them, and we like in Aphelion we have like it feels like every practice we have like someone's like, what if we did this more like immolation somehow? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I but they're on my long list of things that I want to get deeper into.
Cause they're yeah, they're like a band that I wonder what they know and don't know because they have rhythmic things that are really crumbly, gestural drum things that
Yeah,
almost have I mean, I don't wanna say free jazz, but have that, like, loose, bursts of stuff like, I don't know, like, it's, tight because it's super rehearsed, but it's I'm like, "What's being counted here exactly?"
yeah, yeah,
Like, even subconsciously what's being counted. Um, yeah,
yeah,
they have a unique thing that other death metal, but yeah, definitely my favorite New York death metal band for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, dude,
yeah.
I can't believe you did a jute gite. Um, that kind of blew my mind, man. And thank you for the shout out too in that because I mean, in my interview with him, I mean, if anyone hasn't checked this out, Jute Gite. I mean, okay, if anyone here doesn't know Jute Gite, if we're talking music theory and out metal, that's kind of
Yeah,
the outest. I mean, it's like microtonal metal using these like hyper formal um, compositional techniques. And when I had him on my thing, he was one of the first live streams I ever did, Adam. Uh, and he went deep talking about his stuff, but I didn't actually analyze the stuff. I was just listening to him being like, "Yep, taking your word for it." Like sound, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And it's like, and I don't even, I listen to his music, but I never picked it, apart. But you actually you were analyzing the shit yourself from like with like a mic, looking at the microtonal scale that
yeah.
he was using. You actually
Yeah,
did that.
that was actually, that was one of the easier videos. It took a while, to actually do, but conceptually, that was like that's a prime example of one of these ones where it's like, it's so complicated that all I have to do is, like, describe what's happening, and then I have a 20-minute video that's, like,
Right?
that's enough. But because he on it like, on Bandcamp, he writes these little paragraphs that are, like if you're in on the lingo, they're very revealing about what's happening. So I was basically like just breaking down the paragraph. Um, and once I like, there was a lot of stuff. I had like um, this big block about doing microtonal stuff because I was like, I can't play it. I don't have a 24 equal division octave or a 17 equal division octave. Shout
Yeah.
out Vivian, in the chat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Uh,
should have assumed you knew Vivian. I was about to give a
yeah,
shout
yeah.
out. Yeah,
Um,
microtonal metal.
Yeah, but I always had this block about, analyzing that, and then I was like, "Well, actually, I can get away with just, like, not actually playing this." And if it's 24 equal divisions of the octave, that's actually you can notate it pretty easily too because it's just quarter tones, all the way up and down. You don't have to do the, like, weird in between, like, 3/4 or, like, almost a little bit sharp and whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just like kind of following the breadcrumbs that he left. Like you can tell he at some point studied like Boulez or like somebody related to Boulez in this like total serialism thing. But the cool thing about that is that he's pulling from like total serialism and also aleatoric like chance music. So he has the like randomly generated thing, but then he follows the rules like exactly, which is a cool mix. And I don't know how much the like hyper modern classical composers did that.
Well, I mean, from what I remember of the Boulez Cage correspondence, I mean that it was at least that gets. I don't remember all the details, but I think that was one of the big splits then, right? Just like chance versus the complete total opposite of chance. God, the 20th century, what a headache, huh?
Yeah,
That shit, that plus like the atom bomb. It's like nice.
yeah.
But yeah, like
We had World
but
War II, and on top of that, we had Johnny Cage.
Yeah,
Give
it's
us a
just
break.
like, yeah, it's can I fucking take a nap? The like it's funny, Alex Minchek, you know his music, right?
No, I know him off the top of my head. I don't know his music.
Oh, bro, I'll send you some stuff. He was at Columbia, but maybe like before your time. He was one of the founding members of Z's, but he's like
Yeah. Oh, that's where I
but
know. Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean,
but
I know Z's. That's I
but he's mostly known as like an orchestral composer
Okay.
with like he runs like the Wet Ink Ensemble. And anyway, I don't know his line about I'll send you some stuff, bro. It's crazy.
Okay.
But his I don't know, his line about the 20th century was like, it was basically like he's like, when you have like when you have like an earworm catchy thing in your head and you need to get it out, so you just bang on the piano like to just hear crazy shit to like wipe the Etch-a-Sketch clean. He's like, that was the 20th century. Now we can rebuild. But like but Adam Jute Geit, he does he's got the serialism stuff and chance. How did he integrate that?
He randomly generated the row, the 20 the microtonal tone row, but it's not even a tone row because it doesn't have every pitch in it. It's just a random thing. And then he did all these manipulations on that.
Word.
But starting like it's based on there's no way to know if he actually like did this randomly or whatever using I think the description said he actually like rolled a 24-sided die, and like there's no other way to do it. Yeah, and then that's where the row came from.
And also that microtonal shit though too. It's like, to me, I associate that with spectralism, which is, I mean, of course you end up, even if you're not thinking about it that way, of course you end up getting this bigger spectrum of stuff happening, like just the sound of it. But I kind of like, I mean, I've only used microtonality just in that most unmethodical way, just being like, just to have things be a little out of tune and do like, fake, but arriving at real, spectral techniques. Are you into that shit like Grisé and Mirai and those?
I love that music. Georg Haas still teaches here at Columbia.
That's right.
I don't know him personally, but like I've seen his stuff performed. I'm into that. Kaya Sariaho. That's
Sariaho. Well, I heard her shit was fucking amazing, but then it's like I saw like her opera and it was like really kind of like underwhelming and like kind of whack. I don't know. I didn't understand because she can be so sick. I don't know, for some reason. I don't know. Anyway, we can't all.
I would have thought that would be right up your alley though. Did you say L'amour du loin?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's
one.
I can't. Yeah. I was just like, I don't know. Maybe I ought to check it out again. But I like, saw it like live, and I was just like, damn, I'm like actually kind of underwhelmed. But yeah, she's burning though. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you actually did the Jute Guide fucking analysis, man. Everyone's got to check that out.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I feel like with the channel, I have to kind of find this balance of like doing these videos for the real weirdos, the real heads, like the Jute Guy, the Ingurgitating Oblivion, the Krallis maybe is like relatively speaking a little more closer to the surface, and then like also have to balance that out with the like the Meshuggah stuff, the super popular, the Gojira, the all that stuff. It's fun to do, to indulge the like really weird side.
Well, that's what just I couldn't believe when I just found out about your channel, because I was just like, he has this many followers and he's doing Fantafaxath. Like these are like, these are just dudes I know. I mean, this is not,
Yeah.
it's an impressive feat. I don't know. Did you have when you started it? Did you? Well, how long have you been doing it? Like 5 years or something? Or
I started during COVID, so fall of 2020, coming up on 4 years,
oh
or
no
more than 4 years.
shit.
Yeah.
That's wild. I mean, because actually, I assumed you were doing it for like 8, 10 years or something, and then I went and brushed up on this, and I was like, "Oh, it's
No,
actually
no.
newer than I thought." It's a COVID thing, man. That's
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. No, that we all dealt with it in our own way.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
no, this is
I'm
a COVID podcast too, man. This
Yeah,
is
yeah.
or I started it like a month before COVID,
Oh,
but
well, that's lucky.
I know I knew I had a
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. Premonition.
I was down with the sickness, ahead of time. But are you have you changed the vibe at all? Like as far as, I mean, it doesn't seem like you changed the vibe of the content, but like, did you have any kind of like, did you have like a mission statement? Like this is, what it's going to be. The world needs this. I'm going to be this guy. Or was it just kind of on some like, wouldn't it be sick if I did this and
Yeah, it was
started?
kinda like, honestly, it was all of the academic stuff moved online, and there were all these conferences online, and everyone was doing, like, conference presentations online, and it was so whack because everyone would just, like, read a script, like, on screen in front of, like, with a PowerPoint in the background. And I was like, if we're freed from our fleshly constraints, like, we can do much cooler stuff. So I was like, I just want to use this to learn video editing. Uh, and then it became an outlet to, I don't know, like, it's always been very self-serving. It's like, this is a chance for me to work through ideas that either aren't ready for prime time with academic stuff, or to like revisit stuff that I've published. It's something to like keep me practicing guitar, like keep me learning new stuff that I wouldn't normally put the time in to like really learn. Um yeah, I don't know, but I always had this idea that I wanted to have, like, I wanted to talk about the metal that I like, obviously, but also like I wanted it to be like, I don't know. I feel like all the stuff I saw on YouTube, it's like a couple bands get so much airtime, and it's like, what about the Yellow Eyes of the world? What about the
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Well, I think a lot of these bands like Thantifax, Yellow Eyes that you're bringing up, I think some of these bands, it's like, well, I don't know, be simplistic here, but like, I do think, that shit that's really hard to play dazzles people more. It has this like, stuff that's really hard to play is more superficially dazzling to people than stuff that is really hard to write or something.
yeah, yeah,
Like it's just kind of and you know, not to pit rhythm and harmony against each other, but it is like, it's like stuff that's hard to play is the most obviously dazzling. Stuff that's rhythmically crazy is like, also very, but like harmonic stuff, it's like you feel the weirdness, but it's not as like, I don't know, like people aren't like Jesus Christ, that was so harmonically fucked up, like
yeah, yeah,
unless they're like a real head, like I
yeah,
don't know. It takes a certain, not necessarily a music theory nerd, but definitely like a head to
yeah,
care, to care about the harmonic thing. Because like Danta Faxath is not. I feel like that's an example of a band that's really their craziness is driven by harmony, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. At least until Solar Witch, that song's crazy rhythmically too. But
yeah.
yeah, like the early stuff, like the first album especially, it's like I feel like that was one where, like, a rare example where I listened to something, I'm like, oh, this harmony is like weird and out there, just like how deep they went into the whole tone stuff, and
Yeah.
like just like relentless with that, which was so cool.
Yeah, I feel like there's this like breaking point. It's hard to identify, but it's like where shit goes from evil. Things go from evil to like cold or
Yeah,
something, like, right? Like it's not because
yeah,
like Slayer, it's just evil, right? But
yeah,
then you go like, yeah, it just gets atonal enough. Like Morbid Angel is still evil, I'm talking about the riffs, not the
Yeah,
solo.
yeah,
The solo is obviously that's just
yeah,
like Cecil Taylor or something, but like, yeah, yeah, where things get like because Thantafexath, I mean, it's beauty, but you're dealing with like an icy, detached,
yeah,
sort of feeling. It's not you're not dealing with fear and horror.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. It's abstract. It's like, um, yeah, yeah. That album that came out last year is so good.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, they just get better and better. Have you fucked with Gargoyle at all?
No,
Not yet?
I've been told I should.
It's really
Uh,
cool, and it's not what you would imagine the collab being. Yeah, it's like Dave from Revocation,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and Luke from Thanafaxath, but they're doing like it's almost like this. It's the weirdest mix of like Virus. It's like Virus meets Queens of the Stone Age.
okay,
It's more like Virus meets
yeah,
Alice in
yeah.
Chains. It's very
Oh wow,
grunge. It's Virus meets Alice in Chains. The Queens of the Stone Age, maybe it wouldn't pop out. I might be projecting a little because I love them, but
yeah,
because it's definite like nerd brainiac shit. It's
yeah.
not like big dick
Oh, that yeah, that'd be
like Josh Home vibes and stuff. But like yeah, dude, they fucking and some Voivod too.
yeah,
Juan
yeah.
yeah, Gargoyle are fucking amazing, dude. I mean, have you ever? Okay, wait, you never did Portal on the channel,
No,
right? Yeah, because I know. It's like I'm almost like being an asshole, right? It's like asking a jazz
yeah,
guy to play Giant Steps or something. It's just like, well, what about? I bet you haven't done Portal yet.
yeah. No,
But
I've
what would you do? How could you do it?
yeah, I've tried. I just like I can't hear anything
No,
like
me
that, and
either.
that's what's so disconcerting about it is like you go in to try and like grab any of these notes, and it's like it's all just like melting into the production. Like no matter if you slow it down, you try and isolate stuff, you so I there is definitely a video to do there, but I think I might have to do a different route than like the like transcribe it. Like that I think that's been my a limiting thing with some of these bands is like if I can't transcribe it or if it's like uh uh if there are these barriers to transcribing it, like the microtonal stuff I thought and uh some of these band like Portal, there's some other kind of similar things where uh I kind of give up enough where I'm like, oh, I'll do this other band where I like actually know what the notes are at least. But with Portal, I feel like knowing what the notes are is not even really the point. It's like,
It's not. I mean, it's
yeah,
perverse that I would even
yeah,
bring it up, but
yeah,
it is kind of. I mean, that would have to be an interview or something. Research.
yeah,
You
yeah,
could.
yeah. Do
Yeah.
they do interviews? I guess they do.
I don't know. I haven't read any. I haven't really. Yeah, I haven't really like gone deep on that. But they like But I mean, the thing that's so crazy is like it isn't random notes. I mean that
Yeah, yeah,
much. I mean, it's clearly they're playing technical stuff.
yeah,
Yeah, Colin Marston on the stream told me that he did get a little glimpse into what they were doing. I think maybe he talked with them, or yeah, I think they like he talked with them for a second or so, showed them something, and it was some shit where like one of the guitar players is playing some ascending line that's super chromatic and very complicated and like angular, but like in a limited,
yeah,
sort of like tangled knot of stuff with close intervals, but then the whole little tangle of intervals is like rising. And then the other guy is just doing a gliss following the same thing. So it's like taking the most
yeah,
complicated thing ever and then just smearing it with this
yeah,
like just dumb, like not
yeah,
complicated thing. It's like that's just so out and like cult. That's
yeah,
just such a like cult move, like to just have that level of rigor and work and then just
yeah,
bury it in like
yeah.
just
No,
slime.
that makes sense because like that's my feeling is it's like when I've tried to like get any of this stuff down, it's like I know there it's this weird thing where it's like I know there's something there, but it's buried like either between the way like how the two guitar parts are interacting or in the production or whatever, which is like that's cool. That's like really useful insight though. Like hearing
I know.
that.
I know, right? It's like, well, it makes me feel less, it's like, okay, I feel better that I can't make it out, like,
Yeah, yeah,
because they're just that's what they're doing, stuff like that, you know?
yeah,
It's like I really think that stuff really to me sounds like if you like you're like staring in a dark hole and there's like tentacles of like many entities, you know, but you
yeah,
can't make out which is which, and
yeah,
sometimes you'll see a little face pop out,
yeah,
but it's like
yeah,
basically just like this like seething. It's seething music.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what I, you know.
yeah,
Yeah. But
yeah.
like I
That's
guess rhythmically it's not I don't know what to say about it rhythmically. I don't know
yeah.
if that's like
I don't either. It's like it's so like it feels so like hostile to your like the any skills that you've developed for like picking up on melody or rhythm or anything like that. Um, it's like they have blast beats, they have sections that are I think the rhythm would be a little easier to catch in some of the sections, but yeah, it's still the same. It's just like it feels like I'm getting these things from like behind a like heavy wet shroud, and it's like
yeah.
you're just like
Yeah.
trying to make it out and you can't.
Yeah, no, people are like they're always like trying to rep Lovecraft and talking about Lovecraft, but that's the only stuff where I'm like, this is
Yeah.
the outer, yeah, like
Yeah.
the outside. It's like the outside music, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like but who some people were like asking some stuff that might be kind of interesting to like. Well, we don't have to get to questions quite yet, but yeah, what other like well, yeah, I was kinda interested in this, man. Tell me this. Like for your academic work, right? Like it sounds like what you've been describing, it sounds like just stuff that you just naturally love and get and play, you know, in metal, like plugged right into like uh yeah, it's something you just like plugged it into academia totally. It was like this like it organic, like mostly just this organic thing. Did you ever feel like you had to stretch shit? Or I don't know if you could if that's bad to talk about if you're like in
Yeah, no,
academia,
I
like you know, like stuff where you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to explain this in a way that doesn't feel natural, or I'm gonna have to exaggerate or like play ball with something. You know, is there anything like that ever?
yeah, I mean there's like I think when you're trying to get stuff published in music theory, uh there's like this distinction between music theory and analysis, and the idea is like, analysis is the particulars and theory is the like the bigger picture. And I've found that they're always trying to push for that bigger picture. Like if you're going to publish something, it kind of feels like you have to try and speak for all of metal, or say like this is this framework that's going to work for like, all of this death metal stuff or whatever, which normally I don't really feel like that. um Normally like I'm just like I would so much rather just talk about the particular, like talk about all these individual riffs, and do each one justice and look about like what's weird about it, what's whatever. And like I don't know, maybe in 10 years I'll feel like I have enough of a bird's eye view to like say some more interesting stuff. But um yeah, that's one area uh where like at least like and a lot of it comes down to just like writing tone. Like you have to like I like the YouTube because I can be a little goofy. I can
Sure,
be a
yeah.
little like I don't have to pretend like I know everything. Um Whereas in music theory there's like the tone, like writing tone stuff is you have to put on a voice that I don't always like feel like is actually how I feel about it. But
Yeah.
um pretty minor. No, I feel like I've been very lucky to kind of come into this at a point when a lot of other people have done the groundwork of like being the first ones to write about metal academically. So now, they there are whole session like the last couple of years at the big like music theory conference. There's been a whole session devoted to metal. Um, so there's like it's it's not huge, but it's established. It's not like even that fringe within like music theory anymore. Um, and yeah, so I feel like I've been very fortunate to be able to just kind of like take the music that I listen to and I've been playing and uh have an excuse to think really carefully about it,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
try and come up with something.
Yeah. You've, I mean, as far as other, serious, right? Well, I gotta read your dissertation, man. I really would love to actually read it. It would have been, yeah, it would have been cool if I could have done that before this. But these, this,
It's so
these
long. I
grand,
don't really expect anyone to. It's
yeah,
so long. It's like, and it's so, uh, yeah.
yeah.
It's,
I mean, I've read dissertations that I care way less about, so I should
oh,
at least read yours. Like, but yeah, have you checked out? You've probably checked out, like Hunter Hunt Hendrix's, like the liturgy, the manifesto, and all
yeah,
this and that.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
'cause I saw you at that show. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The transcendental black metal stuff, and um, yeah, yeah. I want to read more of that stuff, like these like aesthetic manifestos and these like I started a little bit reading these like books by metal drummers and by like instructional books. But yeah, I've read that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Hunter's thing, it's a lot less about actual, like, music theory. I mean,
Yeah.
more philosophy and aesthetics, and then but some stuff with the burst beat, she kinda
Yeah.
it's funny with the writing tone. I remember someone was hating on her manifesto, but not from a thing of like, "Oh, it's not black metal, she's a poser." Someone was just like, "I don't know, it's just like the tone is like it's so arrogant." I was like, "That's what philosophy sounds like." I was like, "That's not
Yeah.
she's not arrogant within philosophy. That's
Yeah.
philosophy tells you that they know
Yeah.
everything. It's good.
Yeah.
We want that." Like,
Yeah.
or it's like, but if that's not your temperament, it's kind of
Yeah.
maybe feels like, yeah. Yeah, to be like, this is what metal's all about, especially since, like, most metal bands don't come into it with like if every metal band came out with a manifesto like Hunter had, it would be a lot easier probably, as a like if every band that you have studied had, like, they wrote a manifesto, it might be easier for you to be like, well, this is my global take on all this shit.
Yeah.
But it's like, but most bands are, yeah, they're just coming to this stuff piece by piece, element by element. So
Yeah.
it's like it's more natural that that would be your analysis of it,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty. I know, like, metal is so huge, and there's so much, like, even within this kind of like niche of stuff that I'm especially interested in. It's like, like, I think it's in some ways it's kind of crazy to say that like Thanafaxith, Yellow Eyes, and Imperial Triumphant are in the same area. They're doing completely different things from each other. And there's like, I don't find like, other than some kind of like really boring service level stuff of saying like, oh, they're all doing stuff that's challenging to listen to or whatever. Like, I don't know if there's like a meaningful way to like say that their use of harmony has anything in common. Um, and, same with like, even like Carbomb and Meshuggah and Gojira, three bands that are like all buddies with each other and all influenced by Meshuggah and all, whatever. They're doing very different things rhythmically if you like zoom in even a little bit. Um, so I think like that's another one of my hangups, at least from like a music theory perspective.
yeah. Yeah, it seems like a lot of yeah, like a lot of like the stuff that I don't see. Well, I guess this, maybe you could say this about music in general now, but like if you think we're talking about like the Boulez Cage correspondence or something, people like actually just being like arguing about the way things should be aesthetically. I'm always saying like, who, I mean, who's doing that in any genre, but like especially in metal, it's like who's, who's be like, I don't know, who's like fighting for like the right way to do metal. Like, you don't really see that. Like, people are just
Yeah.
doing their own shit creatively. Like, I don't know, like yeah, like it doesn't seem like anyone's like, other than maybe Hunter, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like such a fan and a friend, but
Yeah.
aside from her, like people, yeah, a lot of it doesn't seem like a lot of people are like, yo, we're
Yeah.
gonna change metal. Like, this isn't even metal anymore. We're gonna
Yeah.
challenge your preconceptions. I mean, it seems like people just have this positive, like, doing their own thing with it or something.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, there is this, like, I think, like, really appealing kind of like, it is there is a lot of community, especially, like, I think in the New York scene and, like, some of these other, like, concentrated scenes, but there's also this very individual also like pretty laissez-faire thing where it's like like once you get to a certain point in your like metal journey where you're like you're not really concerned with like gatekeeping or trying to say what other people should or shouldn't do or
Yeah,
whatever. It's like, you recognize that there's there's enough to go around, like whatever it is. Like if and I think fans are the same way. You don't just because you like, liturgy doesn't mean that you can't also like Deathspell or I mean,
yeah.
maybe for some people, but like, you know,
No, yeah, totally. I feel like metal, like people in metal, uh, aren't sick of metal the way people like. I feel like a lot of people in classical music that I talk to, younger people, they want to like rebel. They're like, this isn't even classical music anymore. Like jazz
yeah,
cats, they're like,
yeah,
I guess maybe because it's not institutional, jazz cats are always trying to subvert.
yeah,
There's like the shame or not shame, but what I mean, this kind of like trying to not be like what you are or some shit. Like metal people are like, oh no, this is metal. Like it
yeah,
is what it is. It's
yeah,
not, no matter how out.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
It's funny though, like the jazz kids who like get halfway through their music degree and they're like, man, I just want to play hip hop. I just want to play
no,
like
I know
alternative.
they
Like,
hate
yeah,
jazz. They
I know.
hate they hate what they do, and it's
Yeah,
like, um, except, well, that might be changing actually. Well, yeah, we've seen so much of that.
yeah,
I think like I think now I think the younger musicians, I think especially like black young like virtuosos are more like, no, this is like our tradition and we're proud of it and stuff. But yeah,
yeah,
that like halfway through music school shit is like,
yeah,
yeah. The I got a question. This is like sort of a dumb YouTubey question, but just as a public figure who's talking about stuff,
yeah.
do you get hate? I couldn't imagine what someone would hate you for, but like I feel like most people get some kind of hate. Like, do you get hate?
Yeah, yeah, and not like hardly any. I've been pleasantly surprised. I think like in the beginning there was a lot of like, man, you should learn to play guitar. Not a lot, but like kind of sticks with you. And I was like so frustrated because I was like, that's not what it's about. I'm not a guitar cover uh, channel. I'm like, it's about the theory. But then I realized like, actually, yeah, I should probably learn to like play this stuff a little better instead of being sloppy.
It's funny. It didn't even occur to me. Isn't that fun? Like
Right.
I'm so composered out in theory. I was
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah,
it
no, that's
didn't
how
even
I
occur to
was.
me. Yeah.
That's how I was too. It's like, who cares? I flubbed like 3 notes in that riff. Who cares? You get the idea. But
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
people, care a lot about that. And I was like, yeah, I guess, if it takes me an extra half hour to like really nail it, like whatever, I'll do it. Um, a little bit of that. There's like always some kind of funny ones. Like there's the um one of my favorites was the like someone saying on the one of the Meshuggah videos, like, this is just grinding back and forth and people who listen to this stuff have a lower IQ. And like maybe it was ironic, maybe it was a joke. Um
You mean the person was hating Meshuggah, saying that it's actually not as complex as it
yeah, yeah, saying,
claims to be?
like kind of the like really old fashioned like classical music take of like
Oh yeah,
rhythm is inferior as a like an element of music.
yeah.
The
That's
stuff like that.
yeah.
People like I don't know. I think every once in a while I feel like I come across people who feel like they have some sort of ownership over the music I'm talking about and they're like, this isn't it at all. This is um you're wrong, which is like it's fine. Um yeah, no, I don't
Yeah, I mean
really
it's
think
yeah. I mean
I feel like I'm
it's
like not quite big enough to attract like serious trolls.
oh yeah. I mean
So
but they, people are protective of music, so
yeah.
it's like, I mean, and sometimes people just yeah. Uh yeah, I guess some things it's so self-selective that who the person who's going to click on a Thantafacts
Yeah.
Analysis might probably there's a good chance they're going to be like a cool person or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting that
Yeah.
yeah.
I think I think I probably trying to attract kind of open-minded
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, for sure. You want let's get some let's do some questions. You wanna?
Yeah.
Seems like yeah, sometimes there aren't any, but today we've got some. Let's get someone was asking what
I
was
saw
this?
stuff about Psyopus before.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I love Psyopus. I can't play any of that. And that's kind of my hang up about that. But one day, or I'll just do one of those videos where I don't play it and I just have MIDI
Yeah,
play
yeah.
it for me.
I don't yeah, the Psyopus I've heard I didn't love, but I could, I could stand to check it out more this B Money asks, curious if Charlie or Calder have seen the Formscape video, Esoteric Metaphysics of Music. And the follow-up question is, do either of you incorporate philosophy into songwriting outside of lyrics? I don't know. Are you familiar with this? Esoteric
No,
Metaphysics of
I haven't
Music?
seen that video.
No.
Yeah, for me, for lyrics, not really. Like, not system. I feel like the philosophy I know is like so thoroughly filtered through music theory and like literature, um, that I don't know. I try not to. I don't think it's any of my business what my lyrics are actually about. So
Oh shit.
uh,
Okay. Well, this is we haven't talked about your music at all, and I will admit I haven't checked it out. I actually don't know what your work is
yeah, no,
about.
it's
Yeah, no, but I'm going to. I'm gonna like
yeah.
yeah. Tell people what your bands are.
Yeah, so I'm Florid Ekstasis is the solo, well, band, and then solo project, and then now we have a band again. Kind of experimental death metal thing. Um and it's yeah, I have the kind of sloppy album from when I was in undergrad, and then I have the EP from the pandemic, which I actually think turned out pretty good, and then released a full length last year. Um, yeah, it's like super weird compositionally, weird rhythmically, weird formally, and stuff. That yeah, it's been fun. I'm playing with Christian Moring, who's a drummer who's been in a bunch of different bands, but he drummed for Conglaciation. I don't know if you hip to them, new New York band.
Inglaciation. Okay.
Conglaciation.
Oh, conglaciation. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. They put out an album this summer. Um, but yeah, so it's just like really kind of weird stuff that I'm like, is this even playable? Guess we'll find out. Um,
Right on. Right on.
so
You write it like you write it on MIDI or just on guitar slow.
yeah, and then it's try and piece it together. So far, it's it's we've been practicing for like a year and a half, and I think we're just about ready to play a show. So
Yeah,
uh,
that should be.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean that rules though.
yeah,
Practicing for a year and a half. Think about
yeah, and
how
it's
many
it's
who yeah.
yeah, it's sick to find this drummer who's like also into doing that. Um, I feel like that's like the quintessential kind of metal thing is like, you know, kind of like the Milton Babbitt. Who cares if you listen? It's like it's
Right.
just enough for us to like play this stuff. Yeah, and then I'm playing guitar in this death metal band, Aphelion Entity, New York death metal kind of immolation, worms, defeated sanity, like
Mhm.
um, stuff like that. We also,
Suffocation vibes.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, that our drummer's actually he's buddies with the Suffocation dudes out in Long Island. Um, but we're yeah, we put out an EP this past summer, also, and that stuff's real fun. It's nice too
Sick.
because I'm not, well, at least for the first one I didn't write anything, so I got to just come in as a guitarist and just like do what other people told me, which was like so fun and so refreshing.
Yeah. I love
um,
that too. I think sometimes people assume that I'm not down to do sideman stuff, but
yeah,
I mean, if the music's great and there's
yeah,
gonna be people at shows and I have time, like, I love just laying in the cut and, like, just doing a good job, you know?
yeah,
The, do you if for Florid Ekstasis, you write everything or most of the stuff?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's a very I write everything. I did all the like for this last album. I wrote everything. I tracked all the guitars, bass, vocals. I tracked like half of the drums, and then I mixed and mastered it, which I probably should have had someone else mix and master it, but it's good enough
Yeah.
with a remaster in 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, right?
Yeah.
That's cool, but you don't know when you're gonna play out with that?
As soon as possible, we have a set pretty much together. So we're kind of starting to put out feelers, trying to get on some bills.
Tight. I'm gonna look out for that. That's crazy, you write well, saying it's crazy you write on MIDI, I get that's not crazy. People do that.
Yeah.
I just, I don't know, yeah. I have so many different ways of writing, and I use MIDI for stuff, but I've never written on MIDI.
Yeah.
You mean you actually draw the shit on the
No,
little
no, I
square?
write in Guitar Pro, actually, even worse. I write tabs, and then,
Wild.
yeah.
Wait, you write okay, okay. No, no, but this is like I'm about to learn something just as far as like what one might do.
Yeah.
Um, but you're not holding a guitar when you write it. You're like,
No. Uh, yeah,
but
no, it's and it gets me into trouble a lot of times because you'd think I'd know how to write stuff that's, like, not too bad to play on guitar, but I'm still writing stuff where it's like, "That actually I can't do that without the strings ringing," or, like, "That's a weird leap," like, "That doesn't make any
oh, I mean,
sense."
I have that
Uh,
kind of shit all the
yeah,
time, man.
yeah,
No, that's cool. It's cool to
yeah,
write stuff that's hard to play because you're like, yeah, you're not being. Well, both are cool. Sometimes it's cool to
yeah,
write stuff that comes right
yeah,
out of the instrument.
yeah,
No, no, that's real composer shit. That's cool as hell. Yeah, and you try to figure out ways to do it. I'm just interested in the writing to tab aspect because you're like hearing the rhythms in your head though, right? I mean, you're
yeah,
hearing
yeah,
and then you're just picking the note. Or no, you're
yeah.
hearing where are you getting the notes from? You're like actually sliding the shit around on
I normally like I can I think the connection has gotten good enough that like I can imagine something and I can lay it down pretty accurately. Every once in a while I'll like work out harmonic stuff on guitar, and like sometimes I'll work out harmonic stuff by trial and error in the in Guitar Pro if it's like weird stuff where I want them to be the two guitar parts to be doing different stuff or whatever.
right on. So okay, so it's basically like a classical composer writing straight to a staff, right?
Ye-
But you're not using a staff, you're using
Yeah,
tab, but
yeah.
it's the same.
And I am listening back to it, and I'll put drums in as I go and like try to flesh it out a little bit.
Yeah,
Um
yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, that's actually not like
yeah.
as out as I kind of thought. But yeah, yeah, but you get sick results. I mean, that is like a classical composer kind of
Yeah.
approach. Like you're working with the
Yeah.
written word or with a writing system. It's
Yeah.
a writing technology before a playing technology, you know?
Yeah, which I guess it comes from the like being used to that happening with classical music through the music theory stuff. Um yeah, but it's been cool being in an Aphelion Entity because they it's completely opposite there. They're like the other guitarist Lefty, he's just like always like improvising on the guitar, which sounds sick. And I'm like, man, I wish I could just like come up with death metal riffs off the dome and then just be like, oh, I like that one. And then uh you know, and it's like, what you were saying before about, the different like power dynamics, writing dynamics, communicating things to people. It's like for that band, we uh Lefty and John, the other guitarist and the bassist, will work stuff out together, and then they tab it out and send it to me so I can just learn it on my
Yeah.
own. And then we go and all three of us like teach it to the drummer riff by riff, which takes a while, but it's so much cooler because he's do like every single riff. He's like, well, I could do this, or what if I do this, or what if I do this? And it's just like it builds it up So it's kind of like this multi-layered, multi multimodal way of doing it.
Yeah, yeah, multi-approach. I do love
Yeah,
that. I do that. That's a very cool thing. I'll sometimes this newer Extra Life stuff, I'll have like sections that are completely every drum hit is notated, like on some composer new music shit. But
yeah,
then there'll be a whole other section, I just at
yeah,
least on the last record, with Gilles or Bodie, I was just like, okay, this part you write your part, like just like
yeah, yeah,
completely shift. But if you have an aesthetic that's established, it like actually can like work together.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's funny with Christian, with the drummer I have now for Florid. He's like he's super anal about like playing every hit like I had it recorded. Like so we're playing a bunch of stuff that I recorded before I just programmed drums before he joined. And he's like, no, I want to do it this way. And I'm like, dude, I didn't like I'm not married to these parts. I want you to like put your stamp on it. But he's like, he comes from a classical percussion background. And he's like, no, I love this challenge of like this note needs to be this hit needs to be right here, and I need to somehow make this happen with like, even though it's not really super playable. And
yeah,
that's been fun too.
yeah. Well, that's when it gets into like the drum set is not and it is not being treated as a total instrument. It's being treated
Yeah,
as several different drums, right? Being
yeah,
played by one person. I mean, there's just shit. There's stuff that with notation though. I feel like I say this in like every every 5 streams I mention this, but it's just like when you like there's stuff that only a composer on notation would do, that because it's so like just the vibe of like every time there's like a high A flat, there's like a snare, and every time there's a
yeah,
low
yeah,
E, there's a kick. Like no drummer is gonna want to come up with that or
yeah,
even
yeah,
have a computer brain to do it. And it just, it's not like a fun creative spin. It's
yeah,
just some like mapped thing, but it's like so sick. Like it's
yeah,
just, I don't know, sometimes like that's the idea. But
yeah. Yeah, like I'm teaching this like music history class right now, and one of the things we talk about is like what notation makes possible. And it's like, and I was listening to your early music crash course earlier, which is really cool. It's really fun. The that like video SOA you did, and it's like, so much of these developments in polyphony, even in like organum, and especially in these crazy motets with all this like stuff happening at different times and very different time scales. It's like that's only possible with notation. Like you need to be able to graph that out to see where everything happens. Like that's not going to
yeah,
happen just
bird's
improvising in
eye.
a room.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I know. Isn't that what like yeah, it took I didn't even know, like I hadn't even thought of that until like my 20s or something, when I was like looking back and I was like, "Oh, wow." And like this earlier medieval music, they didn't even have bar lines. Like, wow, isn't that weird? Why did they start doing It's like, "Oh, right. They had to do bar lines because of just polyphony."
Yeah,
And then this guy who I taught, who was this guy at Manhattan School of Music, this guy, did you ever J. Mark Stambaugh? I don't know. You ever like, I don't know, just like I would occasionally take a consultation lesson with him about theory. And yeah, he was like the entire history of West. I love these statements, right?
yeah, yeah,
They're so reductive, but they mean
yeah,
something. He was like the entire history of Western music is about regulating polyphony. That's
yeah,
what it is. It's about multiple voices and like regulating them.
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, that's out. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And that's why notation becomes so like, deep or complex or nuanced or amazing or fetishized or twisted, however
yeah,
you want to look at it. But it's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I love how like younger kids, like I shouldn't even say younger kids, but just people who grew up on DAWs and stuff and just with doing, using MIDI, some like people they're like still mystified by like traditional notation. They're like, man, so you spend all that time learning how to read music. I'm like, you read music.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you're using like it probably more complicated system than I'm
yeah,
using. It's
yeah,
like, uh,
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of like the learning curve for standard notation is like there's so much like weird idiosyncratic stuff that you have to internalize, but like it's designed to be intuitive, at least for like the music it was designed for. So
Yeah.
it's like once you get there, it's like it does make sense. It does show patterns like more intuitively than like the piano roll MIDI editor or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. In certain ways. Yeah. Yeah. But it's like people learn, yeah, but it is the same thing of like a bird's eye view of stuff, and just like
Yeah.
regulating multiple things. Um, well, damn, man. Yeah. Let's yeah, let's wind it, man. Let's wind it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do more in the 2-hour neighborhood than the 3-hour neighborhood because
Yeah. Yeah.
as with many of my guests, we could just go for,
Yeah. Yeah.
five
Yeah.
hours. Just for space, literal like
Yeah.
space on
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
fucking
No, that's
the podcast storage.
yeah.
Word. Any final thoughts, man, or stuff to plug? I mean, everyone here is a fan of your stuff, or they
Yeah.
now are. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I just the channel, the music, Florid Ekstasis stuff. Look out if you're in New York area. Look out. Hopefully playing some shows in the next. I don't even know. It always takes so long, but next few months.
yeah,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
I've
definitely.
kind of the dissertation, I guess, but the videos are more
Yeah,
fun.
I mean, is the dissertation widely available? I mean, it hasn't been
Yeah.
published, or is it
No,
published?
it is. It is published now. Yeah, it's published. It's open access. There's a link. Everything. My website has everything. Just calderhannan.com. I've got all the videos listed out. I've got all the links to all my academic stuff.
Okay, amazing. I mean, we'll link
Yeah.
in the blurb about this, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll link to your site, and obviously the metal music theory, but also also the
Yeah.
dissertation itself. So yeah, so I can check that out too, more in detail. So sick, man. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming.
Thank you. This has been absolute blast. Good to
Yeah,
see.
yeah,
Shout out
likewise.
Bishop and Vivian and uh is that the Garrett that I know? Maybe. Um yeah, no, thanks everyone for stopping by.
Yeah, totally. And I'll probably see you at a show at
Yeah,
some point
yeah,
soon,
at least at
undoubtedly.
the Extra Life show.
Oh, hell yeah,
If
dude.
not before.
Dude, with Scarcity and Peter
Yeah, yeah,
Evans.
yeah,
What?
yeah, that's gonna be
What?
sick.
Scarcity is so sick. Word, man. Awesome. I'm sure I'll see you before then. Maybe
Yeah.
just hang out or something, get a beer.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. I'd love to.
cool. All right, man.
Alright,
Thanks again.
peace. Thank you.
Peace, caller.